Originally developed as a replacement for vacuum tubes in the young telephone industry, the transistor forever changed the world. It is widely considered the most innovative development of the 20th century. To understand the impact of the transistor, consider what it replaced, the vacuum tube. Vacuum tubes take a weak signal, strengthen it, and amplify it, converting an electronic signal into a sound loud enough to hear. The development of vacuum tubes made radios and telephones possible. Telephone lines spread rapidly throughout the country after the invention of the vacuum tube. But vacuum tubes were big, expensive, fragile, power-hungry, and easily overheated. In a complicated device that needed many tubes, like a telephone switching center, the glowing filaments gave off such enormous quantities of heat that they often destroyed the expensive machinery. When the United States entered World War II in December 1941, all effort and resources were focused solely on the war. One new technology developed was radar, made possible through intense study of solid-state semiconductors such as germanium and silicon. After the war ended, physicists enthusiastically returned to work to further research these new technologies in non-military applications. Bell Labs, the research arm of the giant telephone company American Telephone and Telegraph, or AT&T, focused on replacing the notoriously unreliable vacuum tube. It is understandable that this was AT&T's first priority. A long-distance telephone line is a communication channel through which electrical signals are broadcast, but the line can be subjected to interference, static and electromagnetic radiation, for instance. There wasn't much that could be done to prevent the interference. The longer the line, the weaker the signal became. The only way of fixing this was to boost the signal at intervals by installing amplifiers. Bell Labs Vice President Marvin Kelly realized that a viable replacement for the vacuum tube could be made using the technology studied for the development of radar. He assembled a team of scientists to invent a solid-state semiconductor. Young Bill Shockley was the leader, a brilliant visionary and theoretician. Walter Brattain was more mechanical, able to build Shockley's ideas easily. John Bardeen was a thinker, with a particular aptitude for understanding and explaining. Their talents complemented each other perfectly. Shockley conceived and oversaw the experiments, Brattain conducted them, and Bardeen interpreted the results. On December 24, 1947, they invented the transistor. At its most basic form, a transistor is a tiny solid-state device made from a chip of a processed crystal substance with 3 tiny terminals. A transistor can be thought of as a faucet, able to turn current flow on and off, or increase the flow to amplify sound. Transistors offered longer life and greater reliability, were far cheaper to make in bulk, used less power, created less heat, and required less space than vacuum tubes. Within 6 months of their discovery, Bell Labs introduced the transistor to the world, but not all the media were terribly impressed. Time, Newsweek, and the New York Times published little more than condensed rewrites of Bell's press release. The New York Herald Tribune's article mentioned the minor revolution predicted by Bell. However, it added, aside from the fact that a transistor radio works instantly without waiting to warm up, company experts agreed that the spectacular aspects of the device are more technical than popular. The trade press paid more attention. The transistor was the cover story of Electronics magazine's September 1948 issue, predicting the device was destined to have far-reaching effects on the technology of electrons and will undoubtedly replace conventional electron tubes in a wide range of applications. AT&T was limited in use of its invention. Due to a continuing threat of an antitrust suit from the U.S. Department of Justice, they were limited to commercializing switches for the communications industry. Management decided to license the technology as broadly as possible, and in April 1952 held a transistor symposium, charging a participation fee of $25,000. The attendees of the conference included both large established and smaller firms. While the larger firms began working with the transistor, they remained committed to vacuum tube technology. The more aggressive pioneers were smaller firms not already established in the vacuum tube market, and included Motorola, Texas Instruments, and Sony. By the fall, 35 license agreements had been signed. The symposium had a significant influence on a strong worldwide growth in transistors. The transistor was truly turning from an invention to innovation. In 1952, the Sonotone 1010 hearing aid became the first commercial product incorporating the transistor. It was a hybrid design, using both vacuum tubes and a transistor, but using even one transistor considerably extended battery life. As technology improved, this model was replaced by all-transistor hearing aids, allowing for smaller, different styles to be developed. Transistors have had a major impact on the design of telecommunication systems, improving performance and reliability and reducing size and power requirements. In communication satellite systems, transistors provide low-noise microwave amplifiers to silicon-based solar cells, converting sunlight to electricity. The reliability, small size, low power consumption, economy, and versatility of transistors have been essential to major advances in telecommunications and broadcasting. Between 1952 and 1964, $50 million of weapons funds were put into the semiconductor industry, focusing particularly on miniaturizing and improving ballistic missiles. The post-war computer industry embraced the transistor, as it also needed small, low-power, high-capacity parts. In 1946, right before the transistor was developed, a computer occupied 680 square feet of floor space, relied on 17,468 vacuum tubes for operation, and became unusable every 2 days to replace vacuum tubes. In 1954, the first fully transistorized computer was built. At a size of 3 cubic feet, the computer used almost 800 transistors, operated on less than 100 watts of power, and was 20 times faster than its predecessor. Today, computers have become personalized, portable, high-speed data processors. By the mid-1950s, solid state was becoming standard for radios and most other electronic devices. To consumers, solid state had become synonymous with state-of-the-art. The small pocket transistor radio made radio personal. As children no longer had to listen in front of their parents, music became much more daring and revolutionary. The transistor is credited with being partially responsible for the development of rock and roll music. The transistor also decreased the size and increased the affordability of the television. In 1950, only 9% of American households owned a television set. By 1955, the transistor had been integrated into the television broadcasting industry, and the percentage jumped to 64.5%. The portability and decreased price of radio and television allowed news to reach more people around the world faster and more easily than ever before. Once it had been demonstrated that resistors, capacitors, and transistors could be created using the common element silicon, it was inevitable that a number of such components would be connected to make an integrated circuit, or IC. The IC was invented by both Jack Kilby and Bob Noyce in 1958. Fitting these onto a tiny silicon chip saved considerable space and increased signal processing speed. Eliminating the need for individually hand-wired connections greatly increased circuit reliability. ICs are widely used in audio, video, and radio equipment and have made possible the computers and microprocessors now universally employed throughout commerce and industry. In 1956, Shockley, Brattain, and Bardeen jointly received the Nobel Prize in Physics. Shockley became known as the father of Silicon Valley and established Shockley Semiconductors. After leaving Bell Labs in 1951, Bardeen became professor of physics at the University of Illinois. Brattain remained at Bell Labs until his retirement in 1967. "The only regret I have about the transistor," Brattain has said more than once, "is its use for rock and roll. Musicians raise the level of sound to where it is painful and injurious." The trio's innovation was immortalized by fellow employees in song.
Our walls are all graced by the periodic chart. Bill Shockley's picture is sewn over our hearts. Bardeen and Brattain are our sweethearts at the helm.
The transistor sparked a new era of modern technical accomplishments, from military applications to computers to portable radios and stereos, and has forever changed the world. It is clear why it is considered the most important innovation of the 20th century.
At the helm.